Please welcome up Raven.
Thank you, Brady. We're going to spend some time talking about augmented reality in the era of the smartphone. This is some technology that I've been fascinated with since my youth, when I first found out about this concept of virtual reality. An article that I read the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, an article by Stephen Levy talking with Jaron Lanier around virtual reality. We all thought the future would be like this, very large wearable devices in a glove, exploring this virtual space. And then I found out some time at Los Alamos National Laboratory about this new concept, augmented reality, with this childlike wonder of this concept of layering information upon physical space. The problem is this ain't going to work for my mom. Apologies to anyone in the audience who perhaps has a system like this kind of tethered system on one's back to look at the ability to layer. What we really want to do is get to this point. Unfortunately, there are some technology hurdles. We're not there quite yet. But perhaps we have this opportunity now in the era of the smartphone to really look at how these pervasive devices in our pocket allow us to, in fact, have a kind of a augmented reality experience today. In this emerging class of smartphones, pervasive internet connections, persistence around location, portability with fairly robust battery life. The phone really is now a lens into the data space and looking at opportunities now to reach out to consumers opposed to waiting for 10 or 20 years for this vision to come about. We're going to have some short presentations from various folks in the industry who have far more expertise in this category than myself. I'm up here as a passionate amateur, someone who's very interested in the topic. We're going to go through short presentations followed by a short panel discussion, and hopefully at the end, time for just a few questions. So I want to turn it over first to Mok Oh, and it would be great if each presenter first introduces themselves and their affiliation before moving on to the presentation.
Hi, my name is Mok, and I'm from EveryScape, here to talk about mobile reality. I got 3 minutes, so I'm going to blaze through this. So let's step back and think about framework first so we can have a better discussion. So there's a user, that's us, and there's a cloud, also known as Skynet. Typically, the user thinks about it in 3 ways: the past, the present, and the future. Typically, these things map into actionable items: planning, doing, and remembering. And we want the cloud to help us to do this. So there's lots of content and information up there that will help us do this now. I'm going to preface this by saying geospatial-temporal, filtered, mine, ... because all these things need to be organized to help us to plan, do, and remember things better. So the question is, how do we relate as a user to Skynet? And typically, we've been tethered. So planning was fine, but doing was difficult because we're tethered. And of course, remembering was fine. We can take pictures and upload them. Mobility has really changed our world, at least changed my world. So now we can plan, do, and remember things all at the same time because the device is so small. Now, of course, with a small device, there are lots of things that are limiting, but these things are definitely changing fast. So in this context, where does EveryScape lie? Well, we are the real world online. We take panoramic imagery for both outside and inside at the ground level, and we stitch them up beautifully, and you can actually walk around both outside and inside. Of course, we want to be device agnostic, so meaning that we want to pump down our content for your use, both on a laptop as well as a mobile device. So I think I have time for one demo. Excuse me. So here we are at the National Heritage Museum, and of course it's a full panoramic 360. You can look straight up and down. There's a new feature called importance-driven zoom, so you can actually click on a picture taken by a user and actually be able to zoom in and take a look at it and zoom back right out. Of course, it works for these artifacts as well. Of course, a la EveryScape, we can move in space. and be able to turn around and look around as well. So I'm going to jump into the Elmo. If you can help me out here, please. So, okay. Same content that you've seen. I got to drive this upside down, excuse me. So I might be mistaking a little bit, but there, you can look around, and once you see an artwork, you click on it. And, you know, iPod Touch or iPhones are beautiful in the sense that you can actually read things here and flip through different pictures. Actually, thank you. So actually, this is a picture of, who is this? Paul Revere. Of course, when you're done, you can tap it. And so, in the end, what we want is these are tools to help you better plan, do things in your mobile reality. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Will Carter. I'm a gaming designer. So I work at Nokia, although I just want to briefly say that this doesn't actually represent Nokia. Although we are doing some very interesting things in the space of mobile, mixed, and augmented reality. So if anybody wants to come engage me afterwards, I can hopefully provide you a little more information about that. So as a game designer, I really like the real world. I like to think about how I can design games that enhance our experience with the real world. And so I struggle a little bit with this idea of augmented reality. I mean, I really kind of think about how should this augmentation work. And so I'm stealing these images from Julian Bleecker at the Near Future Laboratory. But this is sort of the canonical example. And this is Rowdy Roddy Piper from the John Carpenter film They Live. And so Rowdy Roddy here, Mr. Piper, has these glasses that really allow him to see through through the real world into this virtual world of in sort of this 1984-esque vision of the world where everything's different. But I think this is the sort of the shared vision of the fiction and of the research into augmented reality, where you have these spatially correspondent worlds. Two worlds, one real, one virtual, that are really bound by their spatial properties. And I think that's cool. But I think that's also one really specific way of thinking about how we can think about augmented reality. And so, and it's also a really, really difficult problem. I mean, to get this example to work. So I'm really interested in things that we can kind of engage with right now. Things like distance or time or social relationships, movements, paths, routines. These kind of things that we can kind of do right now to an extent. And think about how we can create these things, turn them into sort of game mechanics, where we can use those game mechanics as entry points into these virtual worlds, rather than this sort of one specific way, the sort of spatial correspondent way of looking at this stuff. So, as a quick example, this is a game called Mob Zombies that I've been doing for some of you that maybe were here 2 years ago. And we have an iPhone game coming out this summer. But this is a game that you control this little character called Mr. Tasty Brains, and you run him around a zombie world, right? It's a pretty typical zombie game. Drop bombs, that kind of thing. The difference is that you can control Mr. Tasty Brains here by your physical movement through the space. And so I'm correlating here in this game the movement, your movement, with the movement in the real space. But there's no other spatial correspondence. Like buildings in the real world don't show up in the zombie world, and vice versa. So what you have is as you're playing the game, you have to sort of equally look at what's going on in the virtual world and simultaneously what's happening in the real world. So these layers kind of abstract and contract and fold in on themselves. And I think that in a way that in order to be good at the game, you have to really be good at both worlds and engage with the real world to a more significant degree than kind of flipping between. Anyway, so that's just some context on me. And yeah, thanks.
Hey everybody, Ori Inbar. I'm the author of Games al Fresco, which was voted one of the best blogs about augmented reality. Also started a company to leverage this technology. And what we do is basically take real and virtual elements and compose reality experiences out of it, which what I want to show you in about a minute. But first, how many of you have heard about augmented reality before this week? Okay, that's a pretty good ratio. Simply put, it's about taking, sensing the real world and then overlaying on top of it additional information. And that makes us people more powerful and kind of creating a new way to interact with the world. So unfortunately, I cannot show you some of my own examples right now, so I picked a couple of examples from different disciplines. First one is actually from tourism. It's something called a Wikitude. You point a G1 device at an attraction, and it pulls information from Wikipedia about that attraction. In this case, it's a castle near Salzburg, and that's the first example. Second example, actually a bit more interesting, from the art world. And Dame, which is a graffiti artist, is taking goggles, markers, and a camera, and he actually paints 3D graffiti in a gallery. So when participants put on the goggles, they can actually experience that 3D graffiti. It's kind of what Anthony showed before, but something you can actually watch in the street. So, if you will, graffiti for everyone without the vandalism. Next example, actually, it's a medical example. Some folks from the Munich University of Technology, where they take a lot of information you already have about MRIs and X-rays and overlay it on top of bodies of real patients so that doctors can make better decisions. And the last example is actually from a mundane area, utility maintenance, but actually these people are becoming Superman because they can see through walls and through the ground. Real-time information about underground pipes is being overlaid on top of their field of view when they look at streets, and that helps them make decisions about how to repair things and so on. And this was created, a prototype that was created by some folks in Graz University in Austria. These are some of the examples. Hopefully in a couple months, be able to show you a learning game that we're building using this technology that will run on the iPhone. In the meantime, if you want to see some more information about, or more examples, go to the blog Games al Fresco, send me an email, we'll talk. Thanks a lot.
Okay. And we had Anthony, I guess, do a demo earlier today. So sorry, no second shot on that one. But I want to start. We have some time, and it definitely looks like we're going to have time for Q&A. So please start preparing some questions if you got them. There are mics in the center, two aisles. The first really is around, we've been talking about concepts of virtual reality and more specifically augmented reality now for at least 15 years. In the case of virtual reality, 20 years plus. And just now, I think we're starting to see examples that are beyond academia and some of the high-end uses like medical research. We're seeing consumer adaptation now of this technology. And I want to get a sense for, what's really been holding it back up to now, and what's it going to take for us to really move to this being commonplace in terms of things my children or my spouse might be using on a regular basis. I'd love to get an answer from all of you on kind of what's been holding it back up to now, and what barriers perhaps do we need to get to for this to be commonplace, starting at the end.
Well, I think there's two problems. The idea of augmented reality, of overlaying information on the real world, obviously is taking that first-person perspective and lining up the information to that accurately. So positioning and orienting the user in space are the two basic sort of parameters that need to be solved for to get that to display properly. I think that you're starting to see the sensors starting to come around, like GPS for mobile devices, compass or digital compass of sorts. But you'll find quite easily that to line up something using even those sensors or even very high-grade sensors is not going to get to the point where it's realistic. It's going to jump around. It's going to look kind of phony. So I think that there's going to have to be some more advancement as far as how people figure out how to overlay things realistically. I think that there's going to have to be advancement on the image processing side specifically. The idea of augmented reality being our eyes are, we're very visual. We have a very visual processing centers in the human body, but to replicate that on the mobile device is being able to compare that image you're seeing live to a sort of database of imagery, and to be able to line that up properly is going to be a big task.
Yeah, I totally agree, Anthony. I mean, the thing is that the technology has matured to a point where, yeah, it's not perfect, but why don't we use the existing software that we have and some hardware devices which are becoming really great, affordable and friendly, and do what we can with that. It doesn't have to be the moon, but I think that there's a lot of great stuff, whether it's games or practical applications you can build with what you have today, and just a matter of putting the pieces together and creating stuff that people want to use.
So I guess, how many of you have read the Metaverse Roadmap? So I think that's a good framework, at least in my mind, to sort of, well, about frameworks, but it's good. It's a good framework to have discussions of augmented reality, whereas life blogging, there's virtual reality, and there's mirror world. So there are categorizations of these different types of, I guess, worlds that are being developed. So augmented reality is definitely sort of a part of it, of course, which is different from virtual reality, as different from mirror worlds, as well as life blogging. So at least sort of for me, stepping back, current technology, at least even algorithms, are going to be not robust in a sense that stereo algorithms will have, problems, and there's ways to solve that, but it's not going to be 100%. And the reason for that being is that it requires a high level of image understanding. So in image, I guess, machine vision-wise, trying to figure out where the geometry is a difficult problem. And a lot of times, it's hard even for the machine to know that there's a computer on top of the desk, which is top of a floor. So I guess the next level of sort of technology, I don't think it has, it's not here yet. We're probably talking about 10, 15 years from now, we'll have much better understanding of that. But before then, I think there are lots of different ways. For things like what Anthony's doing, I think that's great, because you can have wonderful visuals and still use the content that you can with the current existing technology today.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously technological hurdles. Being from what technology you're using to all that kind of stuff. But I think there's also a fundamental design problem. Into how this stuff is integrated into culture, into all this kind of stuff. So I think that with all this stuff, there needs to be iterations on, not only on the technology side, there's a lot of stuff we can do today with this stuff, and we can try things out and see if they work. Like Wikitude can go out there and put their thing out and see, is this something that people want? Is this something that people can want to use? Is this overlay? Is this the interface? Is this the design? All this kind of stuff. So I think there's also design challenges, and those iterations will also kind of happen over, now. Starting this recent time, because we can start to at least experiment with what these things might be like without the context of the crazy backpack picture.
From a gaming perspective, I think what we're looking for is the first Pong, right? It didn't use great graphics. It was just about design, about making something cool that people like to play.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think gaming will possibly have a real strong impact in terms of adoption. This is not uncommon in other areas of technologies. Why not for augmented reality? And we've already seen some great examples of some early gaming. You've showed one demo in your slides. We have time for questions. There are mics on both sides. If you've got one, just go ahead and queue up related to augmented reality, and more specifically around kind of what's possible today in a mobile space. Hard to see with the lights, but hopefully there's somebody out there who's going to speak up at the microphone.
Yes, I have a question. The kind of purest definition of augmented reality is the media is very tightly aligned with the world or the graphics. But if we loosen up a bit and let go of that, because that's where a lot of the difficulties come in terms of the tight alignment, and we think of mapping in a looser kind of way, in our relationship of media and world in a kind of looser interaction, I think that's where a lot of the obstacles would kind of begin to move away. And I just wonder if you have any ideas on this, because a lot of this conference has been about thinking about mapping in different ways, thinking about that, what it means to map. and what kind of information and how we produce the world in a map.
Great. Thanks for that. Some feedback here from the panel?
Yeah, hey Tish.
Hi, Ori.
I think we're a visual species, right? So we like to see things in our own field of view. However, it doesn't have to be, like you said, tied to a specific object necessarily. It's nice, but it's nice to have. So I think that as long as you bring this information and you put it in a way that you can actually relate to what you're seeing, that should work pretty nicely.
I mean, sorry. I think that you're spot on. I mean, I think that we need to loosen up the definition of what this stuff is. I mean, I think that oftentimes it gets thrown into like a research context or things like this, where it's like, okay, how are we going to figure out how to do this, or how are we going to make this work, from a demo perspective and stuff. And sometimes just the practical nature of stuff, hopefully, will start making its way more into this stuff, and people will start iterating on design or whatever kind of concepts and just putting stuff out there to sort of get the ball rolling on this stuff. And I hope that a redefinition sort of happens a little bit with these like looser semantics or whatever about the.
We've got just 1 minute. I think there's time for one question here before we have to wrap it up. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Mok had mentioned the Metaverse Roadmap, but I'd also like to recommend the Metaverse Manifesto for the topic. And we're organizing I'm trying to organize a group locally through a blog that's linked to Ori's, which is called augmentedexpo.com. So if you're local, then maybe we can hook up. And also, I wanted to ask the panel, how much traction are you seeing from investors? Do they get it? If not, what do you think will take for investors to get the concept of augmented reality?
Great. And super quick responses to that one. Anyone?
They don't get it.
That's a quick one.
It's going to take, some proof points, some apps, games out there that people buy.
Anyone else seeing anything other than that? Negativity on the investment side?
I would say I would agree, mostly.
And with that, we've run out of time. Thank you so much.